He was supposed to be alone. But at 3:07 a.m., he opened his eyes to a paralyzing coldness and the unmistakable sting of metal pushing against his eyeball, a needle. And behind it, a voice so calm it chilled his soul, "Don't move, or you'll never see again." Thomas Weller's night began like any other. A double shift at the hospital left him exhausted, his body aching and his mind foggy from lack of sleep. After a quick shower, he collapsed into bed without dinner. The hum of the fan in the corner of his room and the faint ticking of the wall clock lulled him into sleep almost instantly. But somewhere around 3 a.m. he was ripped out of unconsciousness by an indescribable sensation. A pressure, not pain exactly, but an intense, invasive kind of tension focused directly on his right eye. At first he thought he was dreaming. His body felt frozen, his mind sluggish. He tried to sit up, but nothing moved. The pressure intensified, and that's when he felt it, the cold, sharp tip of a needle pressing against his eye. Panic surged, but he couldn't scream. His lips parted slightly, but no sound escaped. He was paralyzed, awake, aware, and utterly defenseless. Then came the whisper. It wasn't angry. It wasn't frantic. It was calm, almost clinical, as if the speaker were performing a routine task. The voice hovered just inches from his ear, the breath warm and slow. "Don't move, or you'll never see again." Thomas's heart thrashed in his chest. He tried to turn his head, but his neck was locked in place. He could feel sweat beading on his forehead, sliding down the side of his face and pooling into the corner of his eye, the same eye now pinned open by unseen fingers. Seconds felt like hours. He wanted to close his eyes to escape into blackness, but the pressure held him wide awake. His ears strained to catch every detail, the soft scuff of shoes on the hardwood floor, the faint rustling of fabric, the whisper of breath that didn't belong to him. He caught a whiff of something. Alcohol? Disinfectant? The scent was sterile, surgical. Whoever this was, they knew what they were doing. Just as suddenly as it started, the pressure disappeared. The needle was withdrawn. The presence lifted. Thomas gasped as feeling rushed back into his limbs. He flailed backwards, tumbling out of bed and crashing to the floor. His hand flew to his face. Wetness, thick, sticky, trailed down his cheek. Blood. He scrambled for the light switch, fingers shaking, heart hammering. The room burst into harsh yellow light. No one was there. The window was shut. The door still locked from the inside. He stumbled to the bathroom mirror. A thin crimson line ran from the corner of his right eye to his temple. The area was red, irritated, but intact. The eyeball itself was unharmed, though the surrounding skin looked raw, almost burned. He leaned against the sink, chest heaving. "What the hell?" he whispered to his reflection. His phone said 3:11 a.m. Was it a hallucination? A waking nightmare? Sleep paralysis? But Thomas had experienced sleep paralysis once in college. This wasn't that. He'd felt the needle. He'd heard the whisper. He checked the entire apartment, room by room. Nothing was out of place. Every door was still locked. No windows open. No sign of a break-in. He even went out to his balcony and looked down at the quiet street below. Not a soul. No car alarms, no shadows moving, no stray footsteps. Still, the image haunted him. The precise positioning of the needle, the voice that knew his name. Yes, he was sure. It had said his name. Thomas, don't move. He hadn't imagined that. Back inside, he washed his face and changed the sheets on his bed. There was a small, dark stain on the pillow, blood just a drop or two. He took a photo with his phone. For what? Evidence? Proof that something happened? He didn't even know who he'd show it to. The police? They'd laugh him out the door. Still, he sat on the edge of his bed for an hour, refusing to lie down again. Every sound in the apartment seemed louder, more ominous. The whir of the fridge motor, the groan of old pipes, even the creaking of the floorboards under his own weight, they all made his skin crawl. Eventually, as morning light began to creep through the blinds, he fell into a shallow, twitching sleep. He dreamed of needles, of being blindfolded, of faceless figures with gloves whispering behind masks. He woke with a start at 7:46 a.m., drenched in sweat, his heart still racing. When he got to work, his colleagues noticed the red line near his eye. He said he scratched himself in his sleep. They didn't question it. But all day he couldn't stop thinking about the voice. The whisper wasn't angry or panicked. It was intentional. Like whoever was there wasn't trying to harm him, but perform something. Something exact. Something necessary. And that thought, that sense of purpose, scared him more than the needle ever could. Someone had been there. Someone was in his room, inches from his face, performing something surgical in the dead of night. And he had no idea why. The following day, Thomas couldn't concentrate. Every corner of the hospital reminded him of something from the night before: the glint of surgical tools, the smell of antiseptic, even the gentle cadence of nurses whispering in quiet corridors. He left work early, citing a migraine. But it wasn't pain that made him nauseous, it was dread. A thick, creeping sense that something was still inside his home, even if it wasn't human. Once back in his apartment, he locked the door, drew all the curtains, and went straight to his computer. The first thing he did was pull up the footage from the night of the incident. He had installed a basic security system a year earlier, mostly for insurance reasons. There was a motion sensor cam in the living room and another just outside his bedroom door. He fast-forwarded through the timeline, watching himself go to bed at 11:41 p.m., the light flicking off seconds later. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., the footage glitched. A 2-second flicker. Then nothing. The timeline continued, but the visuals were frozen. The feed resumed at 4:07 a.m., over an hour of footage just gone. As if someone had scrubbed it clean. Thomas sat back, goosebumps rising on his arms. He ran diagnostics, checked the memory card, tried to recover the missing data. But it was all intact, as if the camera had never recorded that hour at all. He stood up, pacing. Something felt off. He suddenly remembered the faint whiff of disinfectant from the night before. Could someone really have been in his house? If so, how had they disabled the system so precisely? A knock at the door startled him. It was his neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, an elderly widow who lived across the hall. "You okay?" she asked, peering up at him with concerned eyes. "I saw someone leaving your apartment early this morning. Around 3:15 or so. Thought it was you, but he was wearing one of those blue medical suits like a surgeon. Looked young, tall, thin. Didn't say a word." Thomas froze. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I remember because I got up for some water and peeked through the peephole. Thought maybe there was an emergency." She frowned. "Did something happen?" He lied. Said he had a friend over, a night shift co-worker. She seemed satisfied, but he could barely close the door fast enough. His hands were trembling again. He knew no one had been invited into his apartment. Someone had come and gone, quietly with intention, and left no trace. Except for what they'd done to him. Over the next 48 hours the paranoia grew. At night, Thomas would set traps. Slight shifts in the furniture, thread across the door frame, pieces of tape along the windowsills. But each morning, everything remained exactly as it was. No signs of intrusion. No disturbance. And yet he felt watched. Always. The true horror began on the third night, when he found the first recording. It was on a thumb drive left on his kitchen counter. A black USB that hadn't been there when he went to sleep. He plugged it into his laptop with trembling fingers. The file was simple. No labels. Just a time stamp. 2:59am.mp4. He clicked play. The video was of him, sleeping. But not from the angle of his security cameras. This was filmed from inside the bedroom. A tight, close-up shot of his face as he lay on his back. His mouth slightly open, his eyes fluttering under their lids. And in the background, faint and unmistakable, was the sound of whispering. He watched the entire thing, unable to look away. At one point in the video, a gloved hand gently stroked the side of his face. The frame shifted slightly, and for a half-second, a figure in a surgical mask could be seen standing beside the bed. The video cut to black. Thomas fell out of his chair. He lay on the ground, breathing hard, sweating through his clothes. He felt like vomiting. He unplugged the USB and smashed it under his heel, but that did nothing to erase the image now burned into his memory. Someone had been in his room. Inches away. Filming him. Touching him. The next morning he tore his apartment apart. He pulled furniture from walls, unscrewed air vents, opened every drawer, every hidden nook. Behind one of the vents in his bedroom, he found it, a small circular object with a blinking red light. A transmitter. A tiny wireless camera rigged to look like part of the vent system. It had been watching him, God knew for how long. He wrapped it in a towel and threw it in the trash outside, paranoid it might still be transmitting. When he reported it to the police, they filed a report, said they'd look into it, but he could tell they didn't believe him. No forced entry. No fingerprints. No physical evidence left behind. Just a man with a slightly injured eye and a story too strange to process. Desperate, Thomas sought help from a therapist. He explained the dreams, the paralysis, the recordings, the transmitter. The therapist nodded sympathetically, jotting notes. Suggested it could be a manifestation of stress, trauma response from his years in emergency care. Hallucinations aren't uncommon under sleep deprivation, he said. Thomas wanted to believe him. God, he needed to believe him. But that night he found another USB drive. This one was left on the bathroom sink, next to his toothbrush. And he knew then this wasn't a hallucination. This was real. And someone was telling him, "We're still here. Watching." The idea struck him during one of his sleepless nights. Thomas had gone over every detail in his apartment countless times. Every camera, every shadow, every sound. But one thing nagged at him, something he hadn't thought about in years: the basement. When he first moved in, the property manager told him that the basement had been sealed off for maintenance and safety reasons. A former storage area, they said, but there was some mold issue and it wasn't safe to access. The door had been sealed, bolted shut, and Thomas never questioned it. But now, with everything happening, he couldn't ignore the possibility. He had to know what was behind it. Armed with a crowbar and a flashlight, he descended into the dim stairwell that led to the basement corridor. The air was different down there, cooler, denser. Dust danced in the beam of his flashlight as he approached the door. The bolts were still in place, but oddly one was loose, as if someone had already started to unseal it. He hesitated, then pried it open. The door groaned as it swung inward. Beyond it, darkness. Not just the absence of light, but the kind of thick, heavy black that seemed to swallow sound. He stepped in cautiously, each footfall echoing off bare concrete walls. The smell hit him first. Antiseptic, mixed with mildew and something faintly metallic. Blood, maybe. It was colder here, unnaturally so. As the flashlight cut through the dark, his stomach turned. It was no ordinary storage room. The space had been repurposed, meticulously. Along the left wall were metal shelves lined with labeled jars and containers, surgical gloves, syringes, antiseptics, and sealed medical instruments. On the opposite side, pinned to corkboard and taped to the walls, were hundreds of photographs. All of him. Sleeping. Brushing his teeth. Cooking dinner. Showering, grainy, zoomed images that could only have been taken from inside his own apartment. They were dated, spanning weeks. Months. Some labeled with strange codes like REM 2.11 and Cycle C, observation. His knees nearly buckled. At the center of the room stood a medical chair, an old surgical recliner fitted with leather restraints at the wrists and ankles. A tray beside it held used needles, some bent or stained. Above the chair, a single bulb dangled, covered in a dark red film that cast everything in a rust-colored hue. On the far end of the room, a metal cabinet sat ajar. Inside were folders. Handwritten files. Diagrams of ocular nerves, notes on sedation dosage, records of experiments labeled with dates and subject identifiers, most referring to him by a simple code, TW, Candidate 03. The reality closed in like a vice. This wasn't random. He had been chosen. Prepared. Observed. Studied. He opened one of the files. Inside was a detailed map of his apartment, complete with camera placement notes, time logs of when he entered and left for work, meal preferences, sleep cycle fluctuations. They knew everything. Every movement. Every habit. Every vulnerability. There was a monitor on the desk nearby. He hesitated, then turned it on. The screen blinked to life, showing multiple feeds. One from the hallway outside his apartment, one from his kitchen, another from directly above his bed. The timestamps were live. He was still being watched. Right now. Thomas ripped the cords out of the monitor and smashed it to the ground. He grabbed handfuls of photos, files, whatever he could carry, and sprinted out of the room, slamming the basement door shut behind him. His mind was in a spiral, horror twisting into rage. Back upstairs, he spread everything on his living room floor, trying to piece it together. Why him? What were they doing? Who were they? The files referenced other candidates, one labeled Subject 01, terminated, another as Subject 02, unresponsive. The implication was clear. He wasn't the first. Then he noticed something strange. A sealed envelope tucked in the back of one of the folders. Inside was a single Polaroid, a picture of him, asleep in the surgical chair, the restraints fastened, his eye forcibly held open with metal clamps. In the corner, scribbled in red ink, were 6 chilling words. "We only take what we need." His hands trembled as he turned it over. On the back was a printed message. "You still have the other eye." The scream that tore out of him wasn't human. It was raw, primal, a sound of betrayal and terror and fury combined. They had done it. They had really done it. That strange sting he felt weeks ago, the minor headaches, the sensitivity to light, it wasn't random. Something had been extracted. Removed. Thomas no longer cared about evidence or rational explanations. He left his apartment that night and never returned. Within 24 hours he had changed cities, identities, everything. He told no one, not even his family. Whatever group had done this was too organized, too precise. They would come for him if they knew he'd seen the basement. But even far away in a new life, Thomas never slept the same. Every creak in the floor, every flicker of light, every whisper of air made his heart race. He covered every window, tore apart every smoke detector, never stayed in the same place too long. Because now he knows what lives in the dark. And he knows, somewhere out there, they're still watching.